Oh, well, hello and welcome to the Terri Cole Show. I am so excited that you are here. In today's episode, I'm interviewing Nina Restieri. She is an author of Overcoming the Mom Life Crisis, and she also is the founder and president of momAgenda, which is a company that makes organizational, day planners and stuff like that for moms and a whole bunch of other things. And she wrote this book to help working and busy moms go from being harried and exhausted and sort of losing themselves in the process of motherhood to having a step-by-step guide of how can you still take care of yourself and be the best that you can be for your family, while many of you might also be doing what she was doing, which is creating a business, being an entrepreneur, working. She started momAgenda when she had 4 kids under the age of 7 to make her own life easier. She basically just took what she had been doing in her own life to be organized and better than she was because she felt harried. And those her friends all started wanting those things. And then she just decided she was going to start with one day planner and it took off from there. So I hope that you enjoyed this interview with Nina Restieri as much as I enjoyed interviewing her. I'm super excited to welcome Nina Restieri to the Terri Cole Show. Hi, Nina.
Hi, Terry. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. All right. There are so many things going on right now for moms. This is like the perfect time for the expertise that you have because before the pandemic, before a lockdown, before homeschooling, before you were living in one place with people that you didn't see that much and then you were seeing them 24/7, there was a lot. And you've always been this with your products and what you do and now your book. You're very you're a mom yourself, but you're also like a champion for moms. Like, how can you do it and still take care of yourself? How can you do it and still be yourself? So tell me what you have been witnessing and what people are saying to you sort of since the pandemic. Has it changed or is it the same stressed out stuff it's been?
Well, it's funny because I wrote the book before the pandemic, of course, and then the pandemic hit, and everything in my book is still true, but like times 1,000. Like all the things that are hard about being a mom, they're they're the same things. They're just harder because we can't go, you can't go see your mom or go to a play group or hang out at the playground. Like connecting with other people is one of the things that saves you when you've got young kids and you're losing your mind. And we didn't have that for a year. Like it's slowly coming back now, but so many moms I've talked to, they don't have that escape route, that little thing that's going to make them feel better each day, and it's very hard.
Yes. Do me a favor. Tell listeners, people watching, your back. I mean, I gave them the up top background, but what really inspired you to become a champion for moms?
What inspired me is that as a mom, as you know, I have 4 kids, and when I started momAgenda, they were all between 1 and 7 years
Oh
old.
my God.
And I went through this process where I really hit rock bottom as a mom and had a very difficult time. I ended up getting divorced. I had depression. Like I had a lot of serious issues, and I came out of it. And what inspires me now is I just want other moms to not have to go through what I went through, because a lot of it is avoidable. Um, if you just are able to take certain steps to not lose yourself along the way.
Okay, so you started Mom Agenda that when the kids were those ages. So tell us a little
Yes.
bit about your company and the services you provide and the products you provide.
So I started momAgenda with initially with a day planner for moms, which was set up really for me. I designed it for myself, with separate space for mom and up to 4 kids. So you can keep your schedule on the top and keep your kids' activities separate each day. And it's just a way of managing multiple schedules. It took off. I thought it was going to be like my little hobby, and it took off, which was awesome. Like be careful what you wish for. um, and now momAgenda encompasses a whole wide range of products that really help make moms' lives easier. And most of the products I kind of designed for myself. Like, what could I really use for X, Y, and Z? I design it and we sell it.
And really, it seems to me, in my experience of momAgenda, it's really a community, as well as, it started sort of, I think, as products, but what I see now is that you really have a community of women supporting each other, sharing tips, sharing ideas of what's working for them. So for you, what brought you to the point of writing Overcoming the Mom Life Crisis?
I always wanted to write a book, and um, I was always like, what should I write my book about? But what I realized is I had all this material that I'd been writing down for years. I have them behind me. I have notebooks filled with things that I've been writing down. And I was looking through them and I realized there's a theme here. It's all about my process of going from that rock bottom moment I alluded to earlier to really becoming a happier mom. And I thought, well, that's what my book is about, because I already have the content. I just need to organize it.
It's so funny, Nina. I found that when I was thinking about, for years, like what should I write my book about, quote unquote, it's almost like I was looking in all the wrong places, like you. I'm like, oh, when you finally get to it, you're like, oh wait, P.S. I kind of already wrote a book. I have this stuff. So once you realize, like, wow, this is what it is, because it is your really a body of work that has been your life's work. How much like what was your process of writing a book? And you said you finished the book prior to the beginning of COVID-19 pandemic, correct?
Correct.
So what was your
So
process?
uh, the first thing I had to do was to take these several notebooks full of material and organize them. And what I did was I organized them into like chapters, basically. And then I wrote an outline. And then um, I sat down every morning and I committed to writing for an hour a day. Some days one sentence came out, some days 5 pages came out. Even when I went on vacation, I wrote for an hour. Actually, on vacation, I wrote for 2 hours a day because I had more time. I just, I kind of just made that decision and made a commitment to it and stuck with it. And it still took about a year and a half to write the whole thing.
Wow. So what you're talking about with the ability to stick with that kind of a discipline, because I know many people listening, many people watching want to write a book, are writing a book, and yet don't have that kind of a schedule. But what you're really describing is very well developed internal boundaries, not to be boundary obsessed, but I am. And how were there days when you were like, I friggin' don't want to do this?
Almost every day. Writing a book is hard. And I read a quote somewhere. I forget who the author was, so forgive me, but he said, the easiest thing to do is to not write. And I realized every day how true that it is so easy to not write. And it's such a cliche, but it's true. It is hard to put words on a blank piece of paper. So every day it's kind of like exercise for me.
Same.
I have to force myself. And then when it's over, I'm glad I did.
Yep. It's interesting, the work of Stephen Pressfield, and I wonder if that's his quote. I don't know. We can look it up after, where he writes pretty extensively. I mean, a lot of things. He's got 38 books out, many things, a long career. But one thing that all my friends were talking about 15 years ago, 20 years ago, was the war of art. And it's all about the resistance to writing when you're a writer, and saying that resistance itself, which I always thought was so fascinating, that this is like a psychological concept that he really made the cornerstone of his work, inspiring writers to just get your butt in the seat and just friggin' write. And what I read that prior to writing my book, and what it inspired me, the part that inspired me is that he was saying it doesn't matter what you write, meaning, like you said, maybe it's one line, maybe it's 5 pages, maybe what you write that day you think sucks. The discipline of doing it every day is how you will actually be a writer, and that you're doing it for yourself. It's not just of course, to be published. Indeed, of course, we want the book to help other people, right? I mean, this is what we're hoping. But it sort of shifted it from this external responsibility, like, oh, if I do it, then it's for the publisher, it's for the lit agent, it's for whoever. Really getting down to it's actually for you, right? To finish the book, to follow through for yourself, to create a body of work. So there's a different mindset, and it does take a certain, I think, a certain amount of self-esteem and willingness. I mean, how did you feel? I'll tell you how I felt. How did you feel when your book first came out?
Uh, well, I felt a huge sense of accomplishment. I also felt very anxious and very vulnerable. So it was really like a double whammy for me.
Yep.
Like, wow, I did it, and holy crap, I did.
Totally. Totally. I felt the same. I was having different experiences prior to it actually being out in the world. And it was almost like I had this realization one day when I was like way done with the final edit and just, going into like figuring out how we're going to promote it, whatever, where I said to Vic, it was like I had this realization at 6 a.m. and I was like, oh my God, people are going to read Boundary Walls. He was like, yeah, I mean, wasn't that the point? I was like, oh my God, but it just hit me like people who don't know me, like people who don't, maybe, sometimes you can be like, well, the people in my crew already kind of like me because they're in my crew. They're listening to my podcast. They're watching my YouTube. You feel
Yeah.
like you're amongst friends. Then suddenly thinking that wow, this is like the wider public who have no reason. They don't know me or like me necessarily. Maybe they're not going to like me at all. Oh my God. And then you just kind of at least I just got to the point where I was like, is what's in the book the most important thing for me personally was to make sure that the content in the book was what I wanted to say. So what was it for you?
um, so it was very important for me, um, that the book reflect my truth. I wanted it to be truthful because I really believe that authenticity is really the only way my words will ever have power is if they're
Mm,
authentic.
that's so true.
At the same time, so much of my story is so deeply personal, and um, so I wanted the message to get across in an authentic way without just like taking all my clothes off and standing naked in front of everybody. So
Right.
it was a fine line. I feel like I was on a tightrope a little bit with writing the book. Um, and where I ended up is saying, okay, there's a reason for every chapter. There's a reason for every story I tell. There is not a word in this book that isn't necessary in order to tell the story.
That's
So
actually a
so
great way of
that's what it's
sort
got
of,
to be.
right, that it's a great way of thinking about it though, because I found being a first time author that you have some stories that you're like, but these stories kill. Like this is a great story, this is a funny story, and then that story ends up on the cutting room floor because it isn't necessary.
Correct.
Right, it made me feel happy because I thought someone might get a chuckle out of it, but not really. It didn't further the actual mission of the book. So I want to ask you about your own personal background in your growing up with, because the overarching themes in the book and in what in your business and what you do, it's so support for moms so that they are embodied humans, so that they can be themselves and be a mother. So as you said, they're not getting lost, their identity isn't completely obliterated by motherhood. I mean, I said that, but that's what I'm getting from your
Yes.
work. So was this like, what was your childhood like in respect to that? Was it you came from a very organized family or not? Did your mom need support? You know what I mean? Like, was there something about childhood that you think that made you want to create these things?
Oh, absolutely. So uh, my mom unfortunately passed away, and I say this with great love. I am the daughter of a textbook codependent, and I am one as well. So I learned from the best. um, and when you learn it from your mom in your household, it's part of your, well, I'll use one of your terms. It's part of your blueprint.
Mm,
Putting yourself last, thinking about everyone else first. You do it in your relationships, and you do it as a mom. Um, and it's a big part of why my personal self was obliterated when I had 4 children, because I was trained to put myself last. And I think it made me, I think I was a very good mom. My kids always came first. They still do. Um, but I became resentful and bitter and empty.
mm.
And my relationship with my then husband completely fell apart. So I did have that training as a child, and I had to unlearn it all. And that's really, that process is what the book is about.
Amazing. Okay, so tell us a little bit about the book, about what people can find in the book.
So it's kind of like half memoir, half self-help. So I walk through different steps toward overcoming your own mom life crisis, and I tell a story from my own life for each step. So, for example, I'll tell one of the stories. My daughter had a teacher named Mrs. Walsh, and Mrs. Walsh was nominated to be Teacher of the Year, and she declined. And the reason she declined the nomination was, she said, I have 2 priorities. One is to be a great grandma, mom, wife. The other is to be a great teacher. Those are my only 2 things that I care about. Being Teacher of the Year and all the work that it would entail to, interview and you fill out all the paperwork, whatever, that doesn't go toward either of my 2 priorities. So I'm just going to say no. So she's a boundary boss, first of all. But what I learned from that was, okay, I'm going to take out a little Post-it note. What are my 2 priorities? Building my business, raising great kids, being the best mom I can be. And that was the way I learned to start saying no to everything that wasn't aligned with either motherhood or my business.
Amazing. Amazing. And there's something so, it's like simple, but it's really profound about giving yourself permission to have those 2 priorities, because that means really getting over the disease to please everyone else. You may still have had it in certain relationships, but you get over everyone else because you would have to, or you wouldn't be able to say no.
Right. It's clarity. It's just instant clarity. You don't have to think about it. Should I do it? Should I not do it? That overthinking we do, the ruminating. You can say no with complete clarity and no regrets.
I love it. And you also have a lot of self-help. I mean, a lot of self-care ideas and thoughts in the book. So just tell us, like, what are your top 1 or 2 that are your non-negotiables, or things that really add value to your life?
Well, self-care to me it's very important to point out, because I think some people think about self-care as like going to get a manicure, going for a massage or whatever. Like, those things are fun. That's not what self-care is. Like, self-care is really taking care of yourself in a big picture way and making choices that make you feel good. So, like, to give a very simple example, sleep is self-care for me.
Mm.
I don't think we talk enough about it. It is so important. And, as women in our 50s, we don't always sleep as much as we want. I happen to be a very good sleeper. And when I don't sleep, I like, no one wants to be around me, and I don't blame them. I don't want to be around myself. So there are physical things like that, sleep and exercise and eating healthy foods, but it's also things like learning to say no, or giving yourself permission to quit something that's not serving you, like a relationship. That's self-care too.
Yeah, I think that you bring up a really important point because, and self-care can be getting a manicure, but if you're not doing the bigger ones that you just talked about, the manicure or a facial is so fleeting. It is so just a band-aid on like a gaping wound. It doesn't really do the things. The basis for um, growth and for, I guess, really nurturing yourself is what you're talking about from the macro picture.
Yes.
Because really, Neen, what you're really talking about is things that impact your internal experience. Are
Yes.
you constricted inside because you're saying yes when you want to say no? Or do you feel secure or at home because you've decided that your two priorities are these things? So you don't have to make that decision every time a distraction or someone who's not a VIP, right, comes in and asks you to do something. You have your scripts, you know that you're saying no, and that's easier. And that, you're right, that is really self-care in a different way. Because when we think about it, the amount of energy and bandwidth that we leak when we're not doing those macro self-care leaves
Mm.
us, exactly as you said, exhausted, bitter, feeling like a martyr, hating everyone, like just being like everyone is an entitled idiot, as opposed to I need to sort of get my boundary shit together. You know what I mean?
And it's, yes, and it's so tempting because sometimes being a martyr feels good.
It does.
Isn't that strange? Like it's like warm and cozy, feeling superior to everybody, like, and so it's tempting to fall into that.
What's so funny is that it's true. It's like the familiarity of that safe space, even though it's not the space you really want to be in. But that feeling good is also fleeting. It's the same thing. Do you ever, and I know the answer to everyone listening is yes, where you're mad at someone, but you don't want to say anything because you don't feel like being vulnerable. So you're
Mhm.
just withdrawn in anger. You're just like, not talking and just being one word answers and whatever. And for me, if I ever fall back into that, which I mean, all right, come on, at this point in my life, after 35 years of therapy, it probably shouldn't happen that often, but once in a while when I'm really stressed, but it feels satisfying, but it's only for a moment. And then if Vic leaves the house after I've been acting like a jerk or whatever, then I'm left with, well, that was like immature and ridiculous. And why just, hi, you have words. You just wrote a whole book with a whole chapter of scripts in there. How about just use one of those? I have an idea. But do you know what I mean? So it's where it used to potentially last longer. And what I would also notice before I was more evolved in the way that we're talking about, or just mentally healthier, I guess it is that I would want to keep that conversation going. So it wasn't just I'd have the interaction, that I couldn't wait to tell like five friends about the interaction, how I didn't talk to them for 3 friggin' hours and it was cold in that house that night. You know what I mean? Like, what,
Yes.
what is that? I mean, I'm a psychotherapist and I literally don't even know, but it's almost like there was something, I couldn't wait to keep it going. And you're like, why are you doing that? When you shift, as you're saying, when you move it to, it's, I gave myself permission to say no, or I gave myself permission to tell the truth about how I feel, right? To talk true. All of that bandwidth, that time, that energy spent, it's almost like, I don't want to say masturbating because that's like a terrible thing to say, but that's what it's like. It's like it's or spinning your wheels might be better than saying masturbating, where you're going nowhere. There is no productivity to that, but yet the buildup of resentment means I've got to get it out in some way. And so much of what you're talking about in the book is you're really giving us in every chapter ways to come back to self, ways to not have that accumulation of resentment, because it's not just you. You said, if you don't sleep, your family's like, get away from, doesn't want to be around you. It's not just you. It's when we martyr ourselves as women, as moms, as working moms, as entrepreneurs. The truth is, everybody suffers because we are, in many family systems, the center of the experience. And there's that quote that people say, like, if mama's not happy, nobody's happy, or whatever, right? Have you heard that quote before?
Oh, yeah.
Have you? Yeah, okay. You're like, have I lived that quote before? Yes, I have. And yet we don't want that necessarily. So tell us now, where can people find the book and where can people find you?
So you can find my book anywhere books are sold at your local independent bookstore or Barnes& and Noble, Amazon.com. Um, you can find me on Instagram at nina.restieri. Or if you want to check out momAgenda, you can find momAgenda at momagenda.com.
Great. So you guys know I'll put all that information in the show notes. I'm so excited for you, Neen. This book is amazing. Every mom needs this. It's really more of a step-by-step guide to like get out of your own way and to really step into your life as a mom with more joy and less resentment and anger and exhaustion. And especially after this last year we've all experienced, I think everyone who has kids needs this book. So thank you so
Yes.
much for spending so much time with us here today. I
Thank
super
you.
duper appreciate you.
Thank you, Terry. I appreciate you too.